Good morning, everyone. I've been practicing cardiology for over 25 years. I've spent countless hours in my clinic seeing patients just like you, people who come through my door worried, frustrated, and often desperate because they've been told their blood pressure is too high. And here's what I've learned in all these years. The moment someone turns 60, they suddenly feel like they've been handed a medical sentence they can't escape. A patient walked into my office just last week, a 72-year-old gentleman named Robert, and he said something I hear at least 3 or 4 times every single day. He said, "Doctor, I thought my blood pressure problems were just part of getting old. I thought this was my reality now. And I want to tell you something right here, right now, that I wish every single person over 60 would hear. That is absolutely, categorically false. Yes, our bodies change as we age. Yes, we face different health challenges in our 60s, 70s, and beyond than we did in our 40s. But high blood pressure is not an inevitable consequence of aging. It's not something you simply have to accept and live with. It's not a life sentence. In fact, some of my most successful patients in managing their blood pressure naturally have been people in their 70s and 80s who decided they weren't going to accept the status quo anymore. Let me paint you a picture of what I see happening in the real world. Every single day, I write prescriptions for blood pressure medications. These medications work, they're powerful, they're effective, and sometimes they're absolutely necessary. But what I've also seen over the course of my career is that many of my patients could either reduce their medication significantly or eliminate it entirely if they were willing to make some fundamental changes to how they live. The challenge, of course, is that those changes require commitment, consistency, and a willingness to challenge some habits that may have been with you for decades. When we talk about blood pressure, we're really talking about the force of blood pressing against the walls of your arteries. Now imagine water flowing through a garden hose. If that hose gets narrower, doesn't the pressure inside that hose increase? Of course it does. That's essentially what's happening in your cardiovascular system as you age. Your arteries lose some of their elasticity. Plaque can build up on the walls. Your heart may work less efficiently. All of these factors contribute to higher blood pressure. But here's the critical point. Most of these processes are modifiable. You have more control over them than you might think. The first thing I want to talk about is something that sounds simple but is profoundly powerful, and that's sodium intake. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, "Doctor, I've heard this before. I don't even use a salt shaker." And that's wonderful. But here's what most people don't realize. The salt in your diet isn't coming from your salt shaker. It's coming from processed foods. It's coming from bread. It's coming from cold cuts. It's coming from canned soups and sauces and seemingly innocent things like cheese and cereals. I had a patient named Margaret who swore she wasn't eating much salt. We did a detailed dietary assessment, and we discovered she was consuming nearly 3,000 milligrams of sodium per day. For someone trying to manage blood pressure, I typically recommend no more than 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams daily. The relationship between sodium and blood pressure is well established in the medical literature. Sodium causes your body to retain water, which increases the volume of blood in your vessels, which in turn increases pressure. It's physics, it's biology, it's undeniable. When Margaret reduced her sodium intake to the recommended levels over the course of 12 weeks, her systolic blood pressure dropped by 18 points. 18 points. She didn't take any new medications. She didn't have any medical procedures. She simply became aware of where her sodium was coming from and made deliberate choices to reduce it. Now, let's talk about something that I think is even more important than sodium reduction, and that's exercise. This is where I see the most dramatic transformations in my patients over 60. The beautiful thing about exercise as it relates to blood pressure is that it works on multiple levels simultaneously. When you exercise regularly, especially cardiovascular exercise, your heart becomes more efficient. It doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood throughout your body. That means less pressure on those arterial walls. Additionally, exercise helps you maintain a healthy weight, which reduces the burden on your cardiovascular system. It also helps regulate the hormones in your body that influence blood pressure regulation. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Doctor, I'm 65 years old. I haven't exercised regularly since I was 45. What am I supposed to do? Run marathons? Absolutely not. This is where I think a lot of well-meaning health advice goes wrong. It sets unrealistic expectations. The research shows that moderate intensity exercise, done consistently, is extraordinarily effective. I'm talking about 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week. I'm talking about swimming. I'm talking about cycling. I'm talking about dancing. I had a 74-year-old woman who started taking salsa lessons. She goes twice a week. She's enjoying it immensely, and her blood pressure has come down dramatically. The key word here is consistency. Your body adapts to regular exercise. It's like training. Every single time you exercise, you're essentially telling your cardiovascular system, you need to get stronger, you need to work more efficiently. And your body listens. It responds. Over weeks and months, these adaptations accumulate, and you see real, measurable changes in your blood pressure readings. Let me tell you about another critical factor that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention, and that's stress management and what I call emotional cardiovascular health. You see, your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response system, is directly connected to your blood pressure. When you're stressed, your body releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones cause your blood vessels to constrict, your heart rate increases, your blood pressure rises. Now, a little bit of stress is normal and actually healthy, but chronic stress, the kind of stress that sits with you day after day, week after week, year after year, that wreaks havoc on your cardiovascular system. I had a patient named David who was a retired businessman. He'd worked in high-stress corporate environments for 40 years. Even though he was retired, he found himself worrying constantly about the stock market, about politics, about his grandchildren's futures. His baseline blood pressure was consistently 165/95. We talked about implementing a daily meditation practice. He was skeptical at first. He said, "Doctor, I've never meditated. I'm not spiritual. How is sitting quietly going to help?" But he tried it. He committed to just 20 minutes every morning. Within 8 weeks, his blood pressure had dropped to 142/87. Within 6 months, it was 135/82. The research on meditation and stress reduction is incredibly robust. Studies show that practices like meditation, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and even activities like yoga and tai chi can significantly reduce blood pressure. The mechanism is straightforward. These practices activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest response. They lower stress hormones. They help your blood vessels relax and dilate. They create a counterbalance to all the tension and stress that modern life creates. Now, I want to talk about something that's deeply personal and often overlooked, and that's your dietary choices, not just salt, but the overall quality of what you're putting into your body. The DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, was specifically developed to address high blood pressure, and it's phenomenally effective. This diet emphasizes fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats. It limits red meat, sugar, and processed foods. Think about what these foods actually do in your body. When you eat potassium-rich foods like bananas, sweet potatoes, spinach, and beans, you're helping your body regulate its fluid balance and blood vessel function. Potassium actually helps counteract sodium's effects on blood pressure. When you eat foods rich in magnesium like almonds, pumpkin seeds, and dark leafy greens, you're supporting healthy blood vessel function. When you eat omega-3 rich fish like salmon and sardines, you're providing your body with nutrients that reduce inflammation in your arteries. I had a patient named Helen, who was a wonderful woman in her early 60s. She came to me with a blood pressure of 158/92. She was on 2 blood pressure medications, and honestly, she wasn't that compliant with them. She'd forget to take them regularly, but Helen was willing to change her diet. Her daughter was a nutritionist, and together they redesigned her eating patterns. They increased her intake of fresh fruits and vegetables dramatically. They switched her to whole grains. They incorporated more fish into her diet. They reduced her consumption of processed foods. Over the course of 4 months, her blood pressure normalized to 132/80. More importantly, she felt better. She had more energy, she slept better. Her doctor was able to reduce her medications by 50%. This brings me to an absolutely critical factor that I see affecting so many of my patients over 60, and that's sleep. Sleep is not a luxury. Sleep is not something you can sacrifice for productivity or entertainment. Sleep is a biological necessity. During sleep, your blood pressure naturally dips. If you're not getting enough sleep, or if your sleep quality is poor, your blood pressure remains elevated even at night. This is called nocturnal non-dipping, and it's associated with increased cardiovascular risk. I see so many people over 60 struggling with insomnia or poor sleep quality. Some of it's related to medical conditions, some of it's related to medications they're taking, some of it's related to their habits and their bedroom environment. When I work with patients on improving their sleep, I recommend several evidence-based strategies. First, establish a consistent sleep schedule. Go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning, even on weekends. Your body thrives on consistency. Second, create a sleep environment that's conducive to rest. Your bedroom should be dark, quiet, and cool. Third, limit caffeine, especially in the afternoon and evening. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours, which means that coffee you had at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is still affecting your system at 9 o'clock at night. I'm going to tell you about one of my most remarkable cases. Robert, the gentleman I mentioned at the beginning, he was not sleeping well. He was going to bed at 11, lying awake until 1 or 1:30 in the morning, then waking up multiple times during the night. His blood pressure was 168/98. We implemented a comprehensive sleep improvement program. We addressed his sleep environment. We implemented a relaxation routine before bed. We adjusted his caffeine intake. We even addressed some underlying sleep apnea issues that he had. Within 3 months, his sleep had improved dramatically. He was sleeping 7 to 8 hours per night. And guess what happened to his blood pressure? It came down to 142/86. Let me talk about weight management, because it's intimately connected to blood pressure control. For every kilogram of weight that you lose, your blood pressure typically decreases by approximately 1 millimeter of mercury. Now that might not sound like much, but multiply that across multiple kilograms, and you're looking at significant reductions. The challenge with weight management after 60 is that our metabolism slows down. We become less active sometimes. We lose muscle mass. Our hormonal profiles change. But weight loss is absolutely possible, and it's absolutely worth doing. The key to successful weight loss in this age group is not crash dieting or extreme calorie restriction. Those approaches typically don't work, and they can actually be harmful. What works is a moderate, sustainable approach combined with increased physical activity. I recommend that my patients aim for about 1 to 2 pounds per week of weight loss. That's the rate that allows you to maintain muscle mass while losing fat. It's sustainable, it's safe, it doesn't feel like deprivation. I want to emphasize something here because I think it's really important. When we talk about lowering blood pressure naturally, we're not talking about some magical quick fix. We're not talking about some supplement that's going to instantly solve your problem. We're talking about a lifestyle approach that addresses the root causes of high blood pressure. And yes, these changes take time, but they're real, they're evidence-based, they work. Now, I want to address alcohol consumption because I think it's important and often misunderstood. Moderate alcohol consumption, particularly red wine, which contains compounds like resveratrol, can actually have some cardiovascular benefits. But the key word is moderate. For men, that means no more than 2 drinks per day. For women, no more than 1 drink per day. When alcohol consumption exceeds these amounts, it raises blood pressure and actually increases cardiovascular risk. I see patients who are consuming 5, 6, or even more drinks per day, and they're surprised that their blood pressure is elevated. The solution is straightforward. Reduce alcohol intake to moderate levels. Let's talk about smoking, and I'm going to be very direct about this. If you're over 60 and you're still smoking, you need to quit. Smoking is one of the most damaging things you can do to your cardiovascular system. It damages your arteries. It increases inflammation. It raises blood pressure acutely every single time you smoke, and it increases your risk of heart attack and stroke substantially. I've had patients tell me they've smoked for 40 or 50 years and they assume the damage is done. So why bother quitting? That's incorrect. The cardiovascular benefits of quitting smoking begin almost immediately. Within hours, some markers improve. Within weeks, you see improvements in blood pressure. Within months, your risk profile has improved significantly. I want to talk about something that's becoming increasingly relevant in our modern world, and that's screen time and its effect on stress and sleep and overall cardiovascular health. Many people over 60 are spending increasing amounts of time looking at phones and tablets and computers. This affects your sleep quality. The blue light from these devices suppresses melatonin production, which disrupts your circadian rhythm. Additionally, screen time is often associated with stress, especially if you're reading news or engaging in social media discourse. I typically recommend that my patients avoid screens for at least an hour before bedtime. Now, let me talk about relationships and social connection, because I think this is profoundly important and often overlooked. Research consistently shows that people with strong social connections and healthy relationships have lower blood pressure and better overall cardiovascular health. When you're isolated or experiencing loneliness, your sympathetic nervous system remains activated. You're in a low-level stress state. Your blood pressure is elevated. Conversely, when you have meaningful relationships and social engagement, you experience the cardiovascular benefits of reduced stress and increased parasympathetic activation. I had a patient named Susan, a 70-year-old woman whose husband had passed away 5 years prior. She was living alone, didn't have much social engagement, and her blood pressure had crept up to 155/90. I encouraged her to become more socially engaged. She joined a book club. She started volunteering at a local community center. She increased the frequency of her interactions with her adult children. Over the course of 6 months, not only did her blood pressure improve to 138/85, but she also reported feeling happier and more purposeful. Let me address the topic of supplements and natural remedies, because I know many of my patients are interested in these. The evidence on various supplements is mixed. Some have reasonable scientific support, while others don't hold up to scrutiny. Potassium supplementation can be beneficial, but you need to be careful about interactions with medications. Magnesium supplementation shows some promise in research studies. Coenzyme Q10 has some evidence supporting its use. Hibiscus tea has shown blood pressure lowering effects in some studies. Garlic has traditional use and some supporting research. However, I want to be very clear about something. These supplements are not replacements for lifestyle changes and medications when necessary. They're potential additions to a comprehensive approach. And you should always discuss supplements with your doctor because some can interact with medications or have side effects, particularly as you age. One thing I want to emphasize is that successful blood pressure management after 60 often requires a multifaceted approach. You're not going to fix years of high blood pressure with just one intervention. But when you combine multiple approaches, the effects are synergistic. You're not just adding them together, they actually enhance each other. When you exercise regularly, you sleep better. When you manage your stress through meditation, you're less likely to make poor dietary choices. When you lose weight, you exercise more easily. When you reduce sodium, you might naturally start eating more whole foods, which leads to weight loss and improved overall health. Let me tell you about one final case because I think it really illustrates the power of a comprehensive approach. I had a patient named Thomas, 78 years old, who came to me with a blood pressure of 172/98. He was on 3 blood pressure medications, and his blood pressure was still not controlled. He was overweight. He was sedentary. He was stressed about financial matters. He wasn't sleeping well. He was drinking more than he should have been. We didn't overhaul everything at once. That would have been overwhelming. Instead, we developed a plan. Month 1, we focused on sleep. We improved his sleep hygiene, and his blood pressure started coming down. Month 2, we added exercise, starting with just 20 minutes of walking 3 times a week. Month 3, we addressed his diet, particularly his sodium intake. Month 4, we worked on stress management through meditation. By month 6, his blood pressure was 138/86. By month 9, it was 132/80. His doctor was able to reduce his medications significantly. More importantly, Thomas felt better than he had in 20 years. He had more energy. He felt more in control of his health. This is what I believe is possible for you. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it doesn't require commitment and effort. What I'm saying is that it's possible. Your age is not destiny. The fact that you're over 60 doesn't mean you're sentenced to high blood pressure and a cocktail of medications. You have far more agency and control over your health than you might believe. As you think about implementing these changes, I want to encourage you to start somewhere. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick 1 or 2 areas where you feel you can make changes. Maybe it's increasing your physical activity. Maybe it's reducing sodium. Maybe it's improving your sleep. Start there. Build momentum. Once you've established new habits and you're seeing results, you'll be motivated to make additional changes. And please, work with your healthcare provider. These lifestyle changes are incredibly powerful, but in some cases, medications are still necessary. The goal isn't to get off medications at all costs. The goal is to achieve healthy blood pressure in whatever way works for you, whether that's through lifestyle changes alone, through a combination of lifestyle changes and medications, or through medications. The important thing is that your blood pressure is controlled and that your cardiovascular health is protected. I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me today. This information comes from my genuine desire to help people over 60 reclaim their health and their sense of control. If this has been valuable to you, I would truly appreciate it if you would subscribe to this channel. Subscribe so that you don't miss future videos where I'll be addressing other health topics relevant to people in your stage of life. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me about your experience with blood pressure management. What changes have been most helpful for you? What challenges are you facing? Your comments not only help me understand what's most important to you, but they also help other people in the community who might be facing similar challenges. Together, we're building a community of people who are taking control of their health and living the best lives possible after 60.